what happens for a lot of us is if we measure our life, our success, according to somebody else's definition, it can actually lead us down a pretty bad path. I need to get clear on what success is for me. You need to get clear on what success is for you. And the most important thing is then we keep our eyes on our own paper, like live our life. It's okay to be influenced and inspired. I'm not saying not to have ambition, but what I'm saying is, what is the best version of you, the healthiest version of you, and how do you take steps in that direction? I think that's the path.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leadership, where we dive into smart thinking for today's leaders so you can navigate change, build stronger teams, and reclaim your energy. And remember, for free resources to help you in your leadership journey, go to leadership.net. That's leadership.net. For this episode, I'm sitting down with Tim Schurrer, author of The Secret Society of Success. Stop chasing the spotlight and learn to enjoy your work and life again. Tim's career has been defined not by chasing fame, but by building movements. As a key leader behind the launch of StoryBrand and Business Made Simple, he helped create frameworks that transformed how organizations communicate and grow. Tim challenges the cultural obsession with recognition and invites us to discover a deeper, more sustainable definition of success, one rooted in contribution, humility, and joy. Whether you're leading a team, building a business, or simply trying to find more meaning in your work, Tim's insights will inspire you to rethink what matters most. Let's dive into this conversation about redefining success and rediscovering fulfillment. Tim Schurrer, welcome to Leadership.
Roger, great to be here.
Great to have you. Let me ask this, Tim. What does the phrase "stop chasing the spotlight" mean to you, and why is it important?
Yeah, so when I was 21 years old, I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. I grew up in Kansas City, moved to Nashville because I was going to be the next John Mayer. I was going to be in lights, and The fact of the matter is I am not here with you with a guitar, and that's because I failed. It did not work in the way that I wanted it to. But what I have been learning ever since then is a new way to think about my life. I thought the way that I was going to be truly happy, success for me was really getting to the spotlight, being the person that everyone was talking about. But it's been interesting because over the last 15, 20 years, as I've really progressed through my career, the further and further I got away from the spotlight, the more and more fulfilled I felt in my work. So culturally, though, there's this conversation that basically says, if you want to be successful, it's fame, money, and power. And there's something about that has never really resonated because that's been the opposite of my story. The more I kind of detached from those things, that as the, kind of main pursuit, that was where things really started to lock into place. And so I don't think I'm the only one who has kind of questioned whether these things are the only ways to think about success. I think a lot of us are asking some very similar questions.
Well, you write about a secret society. Can you elaborate on what that is and how it challenges traditional views of success?
Yes. So one of my favorite members of the secret society is a guy that a lot of people probably have never even heard about. So I'm sure everyone listening knows the story of Apollo 11, man's first trip to the moon.
Sure.
You've got Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. But what a lot of people don't know, there is a third astronaut on that mission. And the guy's name is Michael Collins. So Michael's job is he Ubered Neil and Buzz to the moon. So he got them all the way to the moon, dropped them off so those guys could do all the things that they had to do on the moon's surface. But Michael stays in the command module, orbits it 26 times until those guys are ready to be picked up and brought back to Earth. And what I like so much about this story is when Michael gets back to Earth and sits down with the press, you could have imagined kind of the human reaction might have been something like him saying, well, it sure would have been nice to walk on the moon. I mean, he did all the same training as those guys, made it all the way there, and yet he was so close and never got to walk on the moon. But that's not at all what he said or what he talked about. He talked about how content he was to have had one of those 3 seats. Like he was happy to be part of the mission. So why is it that in our lives, we feel like we have to walk on the moon to be happy? And what Michael has shown me is there is a secret society of people that define success a little bit differently, that are showing us kind of these new ways to think about it. And so Michael is one of many that I have been learning from that is shaping the way that I show up in my life. And what's interesting is it's a guy that nobody's ever heard of. So there's a lot of people that are in prominent positions that can teach us what, success is, that are in the secret society. But there's also people like Michael who maybe are a little bit more behind the scenes that are teaching us too.
Well, we couldn't get through life if it weren't for the people behind the scenes.
That's right.
I'm thinking of being on the operating table getting surgery. You might think about the surgeon, but all those other people operating all the machines and monitoring all the heart rate and the blood and all that, you got to have them.
You got to have the person working construction to help pave the road that I drove on just to get to my office. I mean, every single day there are people that are doing work behind the scenes that aren't getting the credit and aren't getting the recognition. And I think the problem that I have with kind of how culture thinks about success is it's almost as though these positions in the spotlight are the only roles that matter. Like, think about a concert, for example. You need the person standing in the center of the stage for the whole thing to work. But you also need the person taking the tickets at the front door, the person playing guitar on the side stage, the person running the sound. So let me be clear. I don't have a problem with the idea of the spotlight because I do think that role is important. But what I think that I got caught up in, where I have struggled, is when you start to think that that's the only one role that matters. And when I was coming up in my career, I was really just living in this identity that wasn't really my true identity. I thought I was this, and that pursuit has shown me who I was meant to be was a guy that helps others win. And when I have reoriented my life, my priorities, my happiness around being somebody who helps others win, that for me has been the unlock. And so it takes all of us. It takes every single person in an organization to make things go. It takes Michael Collins being a part of that mission for the whole thing to work. And so for all of us, I think it's just important to find, where is your role? If the hand is trying to be a foot, it's not going to work out that well, right? So like, who are we wired to be? And how do we kind of pursue that to the best of our ability? Because even for Michael Collins, he was one of 3 people chosen to go to the moon. He was excellent at what he did, and yet he didn't get caught up in, how much or how little recognition he got for the work that he did. And I think that was kind of one of his great gifts.
After I had read your book, I was reminded of what you're talking about, and I found myself one afternoon in the kitchen making a salad. And I went to the refrigerator and got a package of vegetables. And I found myself trying to imagine all of the people who had brought that to my refrigerator. The farmer who planted it, the farmer who cultivated it, the workers who picked it, the workers who packed it, the truck driver who took it to the supermarket, the person who put it in the truck to deliver to my home, and the people who manufactured the wrapping. I mean, it's probably dozens of people when you think about it.
Yeah, I agree. And that exists for us in almost every single facet of our life. It's remarkable.
Now, in your experience, Tim, why do so many people feel burned out despite working hard to succeed?
I think a lot of people are bummed out about the fact that they aren't recognized for the work that they do. So, I remember when I was working with StoryBrand and Don Miller, we had Dan Heath on the podcast. And, Dan was talking about his book, The Power of Moments. And in that book, there's a study where they interviewed leaders and, they asked, okay, do you frequently recognize your people for the work that they do? And 80% of these leaders said yes. And then they did something interesting. They asked the direct reports, do your leaders frequently recognize you for the work that you do?
It was a different percentage, I would guess.
It was quite a different percentage. 20% of them said yes. So they called that 20% to 80% that the recognition gap. There are so many people working so hard each and every day, doing work behind the scenes. And, I don't know if you've ever worked for somebody where they didn't really seem to appreciate you. They just kind of took everything that you did for granted. That's a pretty tiring and exhausting place to be.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people get burnt out because they are showing up every day working so hard and nobody even notices. And so the simple things that we can all do, whether we are the leader or even just to colleagues, recognize people for the work that they do. Just tell them thank you. Let them know that you notice them. And it's amazing, even when we do simple things like that, how it makes a difference. And, I'm trying to teach my kids what it looks like to recognize people. One of my friends, John Acuff, he says, if you want a kind 16-year-old, teach them kindness when they're 6 and give them 10 years to practice.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like every night when we sit down to dinner, my wife makes dinner for us almost every night. And when we sit down, I just say, thank you for making this food. Right. Like it's a simple act of recognition and these little things that I think go a really long way at home. And, it's true at work as well.
And I have found it to be helpful, in addition to thanking somebody for something, be very specific about it in the workplace rather than just thanks for your work. Thanks for what you did on this project. Let me tell you, the three particular things you did helped us in these ways. That's when it really reinforces it.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you is not enough. And, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. The more specific you can be, this made a huge difference for this reason. It resonates with people more, right?
Well, sure.
It's like, it means more. When you give David, I work with a guy named David Novak, and I'm sure I'll talk about him several more times throughout this conversation. But, David always says, when you recognize somebody, you give a piece of your heart away.
Yeah.
And so when you are really leaning in, people notice that kind of stuff. And I think that's what connects people as humans, is when you can give a very human response to, some of those kinds of situations and moments.
Well, we clearly have a huge employee engagement issue worldwide, and have for decades. And I think a lot of the reason behind that is the lack of what you're talking about right now.
I just read this article in Fast Company. It said 80% of people say that their workplace is toxic.
Oh.
80%. That is 4 in 5 people.
And that's where they spend the majority of their lives.
And also know that the 2 reasons why people leave is they don't feel appreciated or they don't like their boss.
Yeah.
So often it's the toxic leader that they don't like, who likely is not recognizing them or appreciating them, taking them for granted, or, other things that they would do. But it's just like these simple things. It's so simple. Leadership,
Right.
when you really boil it down, is not that hard.
Right.
What if you just showed up and let people know that you see them, that you appreciate them? Hey, we're all working on this thing together. I spent a few years working at Apple. And as you know, leaders cast a shadow. People do what the leader does. And so when I first started working at Apple, Steve Jobs was CEO, but then he passes away, and Tim Cook is who takes over the company. And Apple does these big keynote presentations whenever they launch new products, and they
Right.
talk all about them, and ton
It's
of
a big-
media
big-
around it.
Big production.
Huge. And this particular keynote, this day, was a huge moment for Apple because they were releasing the Apple Watch, which was the first new product in a new category that they had released since Steve's passing. So a lot of weight, as you would imagine, on this moment and this launch. And so Tim Cook does this big announcement, and then he's being interviewed by David Muir on national television. And David asks him, is this the moment for you, the moment of your career at Apple? And Tim's answer carries more weight when you really understand the context. So Tim had worked in the shadow of Steve Jobs for years. And people don't really know who Tim is. Everybody knows who Steve Jobs is. And so you could see the temptation for Tim to use that as a moment to really talk about himself, to let everybody know he is the guy for the job, the one who's going to take Apple into this next era. And yet Tim doesn't take the bait. So when David asks him, is this the moment for you, the moment of your career at Apple? Tim, without hesitation, says, well, it's a moment for Apple. I don't really think about myself that much. Which to me kind of tells everything that I need to know about how he shows up as a leader. Because that is an answer that is just so full of humble confidence. So the humility to know that releasing something like an Apple Watch takes hundreds, if not thousands of employees. This isn't the Tim Cook show, right? This is the whole team came together to make this possible. But there's also a confidence that Tim has in that response because he knows who he is. He doesn't need to remind us all, how gifted he is or all the ways that he contributed. He's got that self-confidence. And so I think that's really important too, is when you really look around yourself as a leader, when you look around you, you will see there are a lot of people contributing to the work that is being done. The more we can recognize people for that work, I think that's one of those ways that you turn that 80% toxic workplace stat. That's how we start to reduce that, because people feel recognized, they feel appreciated, and it just might help them like you more as a leader as well.
Well, you used 2 words to sum this up. You said humble confidence. Some people might think those 2 words are contradictory, but they are not.
Yeah, I agree.
In fact, somebody who's really humble and capable, they're going to be confident. It's okay to be confident.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, Tim, what's one common mistake that you see people making when trying to define their success?
I think that when we are so concerned and obsessed around what other people think about us, I think that can take us down a really, unhealthy path.
Right.
I really struggle posting on social media. And the reason for that is I don't always like my intent. So when I am posting on social media, when other people, post on social media, I think that oftentimes it goes beyond just the what am I sharing, kind of the purity of I just want to share my life. And it actually can very easily slip into everybody look at me and everybody think that I am great. Right. So in this kind of a situation, posting success on social media, success in sharing content, we're measuring our success against likes and comments and those kinds of things. And so I think a trap that a lot of us fall into is we demand attention.
Well, the term selfie says it all.
Yeah, that's right. I remember another Chip and Dan Heath book, actually. And this was really what illuminated this issue in my life is they had this book Made to Stick.
Right.
And there was a line in that book that said, are you demanding or attracting attention? And if I'm honest, there are a lot of times in my life where I am just demanding attention. I want people to notice me. I want people to think and feel a certain way about me. And the more that I have learned to not be concerned about that stuff, the happier I have been.
Oh, sure. You sleep better.
And so what I do is actually more about what I don't do. If I can't post something without it being like, if I'm in an unhealthy headspace, if I don't first ask myself, why am I sharing this? And if there is not a purity to the joy of sharing, because I don't think it's a bad thing to post on social media. It can be really unhealthy for me. And so I just need to check my intentions. Why am I doing the thing that I'm doing? The thing that I think can get in the way of our success is when we are so concerned about what other people think. Are we demanding or attracting attention? And the more that I find myself demanding people pay attention to me, that is what I call the spotlight mindset. The spotlight mindset is this unhealthy desire for attention and recognition. And if we are doing things, from that spotlight mindset, I think that we need to stop, choose a different path, because the more that we can kind of put ourselves in the headspace and the mindset of the secret society kind of goes in the opposite direction. And so I think that it's just a good check for everybody. It's a good check for myself and one that I have to keep top of mind all the time.
Well, I'm glad to see that you put the guitar aside and you're doing the work you're doing. You're not in front of the spotlight at the Grand Ole Opry, but you're helping a lot of people, so it's okay.
The thing about that, actually, I think the fact that I didn't make it as a musician is one of the greatest gifts that God has ever given to me. And the reason is I couldn't have handled it. I was in such a horrible headspace. I didn't know it at the time. It wasn't like malicious, but I just feel like if I would have had a lot of success, it would have been like trying to build a house on, pretty messed up foundation. There were a lot of cracks in that foundation, a lot of insecurity. And so I think what I've been able to do now as I, fast forward 15 years, I write the book, I'm in a much healthier headspace. I can, have my name on the front of a book, but the biggest shift has been in my own heart and in my own mind. I truly want to help others win. So the more that I can talk about that, thinking about other people's success more so than my own, that to me has been the shift. So yeah, I'm very glad that I did not succeed. And our failures can teach us often our biggest lessons in our life. And it's been amazing. I'm so happy that I'm also not holding the guitar right now. I'd be miserable. It would not have been good.
Your change initiative has the budget. The strategy looks solid, and everyone's nodding along in the meetings. But for some reason, it's going nowhere. Dr. Roger Dean Duncan knows why. After 40 years in the trenches with top business leaders, he knows that change fails when organizations lack the right foundations: trust, accountability, and real communication. Dr. Duncan's free 10-minute assessment shows you exactly where your organization stands. Answer a few straightforward questions that reveal your true change readiness level. Don't waste months discovering the hard way. Get your free assessment today at leadershop.net/change. Again, that's leadershop.net/change.
Well, Tim, when defining success, why is it important to prioritize your personal values over societal expectations? And there are a lot of expectations out in society.
For every single person listening, you and I included, if we were all to do this exercise, I think we would all have very different answers. Okay, so fill in the blank for me. Success is, all of us are going to have different answers because we are all different. We're wired different. Our priorities are different. One example, a friend of mine is an author, a speaker, and he probably speaks 40 to 50 times a year. His kids are in college. He's an empty nester. If he speaks 40 or 50 times a year, he and his wife go on all these adventures together. Like, this is an amazing thing for them. If I, at this stage with an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, if I were to speak 40 to 50 times a year, that wouldn't work for me. So if I measure my success to his, it's not fair.
Right.
Because we're not living the same story. So what happens for a lot of us is, if we measure our life, our success, according to somebody else's definition, it can actually lead us down a pretty bad path. I need to get clear on what success is for me. You need to get clear on what success is for you. And the most important thing is then we keep our eyes on our own paper, like live our life. And it's okay to be influenced and inspired. And, I'm not saying not to have ambition, but what I'm saying is, what is the best version of you, the healthiest version of you, and how do you take steps in that direction? I think that's the path that I'm trying to be on.
Sure. It reminds me of the saying, nobody on his deathbed ever said he wished he had spent more time at the office. Now, there may be somebody who would say that, but I think most people would not. When they're just about at the end of their mortal life, that's when a lot of, at least in my observation, that's when a lot of people really start to evaluate what they've done with their time, because they're out of time. And a lot of times they talk about what they wish they had done. Fortunately, a lot of people are able to say, I'm so happy that I did this. I think, Tim, you're going to be one of those people.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying.
Yeah.
I really am. And I think the way that I do it is, you have to constantly ask, what is success for me right now?
Right.
Because seasons change.
Sure they do.
Right? Like, the friend that I just gave the example, his kids are out of college. He can start to think about his life in a different way because circumstances have changed. So what I hope for all of us is that we find the courage first to ask the question, what is success? To be honest about where we are in relation to, where we are now and compared to where we want to be. And then the courage to just start taking those steps, because it's hard. Change is hard.
Sure.
And sometimes people feel a lot of shame if they're kind of living or chasing after something that maybe they know isn't right. And it takes a lot of courage. But I hope that even just from asking the question, starting to consider what does it look like to maybe head in a different direction, it's going to take courage, but I think it's very important work.
Well, it takes courage. It takes confidence to stop doing something and tell yourself, this isn't working. I'm going to change. I'm going to do something else. Some people are reluctant to do that, and they stay in the same frustrating path for years. So, Tim, what's the danger of tying identity to achievement? You've touched on that, but elaborate a little bit.
Identity and achievement. So my identity, I've actually been spending a lot of time thinking about this. There's a guy I've been learning a lot from named Jamie Winship. And Jamie has this great book called Living Fearless. And it talks a lot about identity. I am trying, first step is just like, who are you? How are you wired? And, for me, I've gotten the clarity around, I am somebody who helps others win. So I'm trying to orient my entire identity around that. And when I think about what is success, how do you connect identity and, achievement, all that stuff, it can get a little murky, but I don't think achieving is a bad thing. And, I want to be really great at helping others win. I want to be good at that,
Sure.
to aspire, to have ambition. These are not bad things. It is leveraging your gifts, your identity to be able to make the most amount of progress to help the larger whole, to make an impact in the world. I think that all of us matter. We want to feel like our lives matter. So the best thing I think that you can do is find what is it that you were made to do? How can you, improve the lives of the people around you in the space where you are? And so for me, I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to make sure that I'm processing my decisions, running them through the filter of, okay, this decision that I'm about to make, is it in alignment with like my identity, helping others win? Is it that? Or is this about the Tim show and, people thinking that I'm great? And so I'm trying to step into life with a healthier headspace. I'm also spending a lot of time just asking God, all right, what do you want me to know? How do you want me to move forward? And then trying to find the courage to take those steps.
So you clearly coach people, either formally or informally. You're coaching people right now on this podcast. So how do you help people understand their unique path to success without comparing themselves to others? A lot of people have a tendency to want to compare themselves to somebody else rather than live their own unique life.
Mm-hmm. There's a process that I really like, and it's from a guy named Ben Crane, who's a professional golfer. At the end of every round of golf, he asks himself 3 questions. What did I do well? What did I learn? And how can I act on what I learned? And those questions are helpful at the end of a round of golf, but I also think we can apply those same things to our personal lives. If tonight, whoever is listening, if you were to ask yourself, what did I do well? What did I learn? And how can I act on what I learned? Every day you're giving yourself an opportunity to assess where you're at. How can you improve? But what I really also like about those questions is it doesn't have anything to do with anybody else.
Right.
The way that you don't compare yourself to other people is to spend less time comparing yourself to other people and more doing a self-assessment and just trying to improve yourself. There are a lot of people that I look up to, and I learn from a lot of people. I spend time studying leaders. I mean, I kind of get paid to do that. That is part of my job with David Novak, and we have this podcast called How Leaders Lead, where we're interviewing leaders and CEOs. I get to learn from these amazing people, and yet I try not to measure my success up against theirs. I try to be inspired by them. I try to learn their best practices, and then I take those best practices and apply them to my own life so that I can improve and I can make an impact in my world, in the family that I was born into the experiences and the community that I've gotten to have. And so to me, that's where I try to invest more of my time. Learn from people, but don't kind of get caught up in that, comparison trap. It's very easy to do, though.
Yeah, you and I are blessed. We should be grateful for the gigs we have. We spend a lot of time talking with really smart people, and if we're humble enough, we're going to learn every time. I'm grateful for the technology that it makes it possible. I'm grateful for the season of my life that makes it possible. And you and I are in a very good place, I think.
Isn't that great? That's such an important mindset, though, because you look at all that as a gift. We did this podcast with Patrick Lencioni, and he has this incredible project that he's been doing over the last several years called The Working Genius. And you do this little assessment, and there's 6 different things, 6 different geniuses, mm-hmm. Whatever the plural of genius is. So when he talks about identifying what your gifts are, he says, your gifts, the things that you have been given, this isn't to then have you turn around and be like, aren't I amazing? It's like, no. What a gift. I'm so grateful. And I think that is so important. Is like whatever you have around you, the more that you can look at your life with gratitude, I just think that puts us into a better headspace. The fact that you've been able to interview so many amazing people on your show, I'm happy for you. But what I'm most happy about for you is that you have had the opportunity to learn from all of those people. And if you can keep your headspace in that grateful posture versus a like, everybody look at me and think I'm great, I think that's the razor's edge that will kill you if you stay in that unhealthy headspace. But I think where it really becomes a gift is when you can look at things like that with gratitude. So you just said that to me, it stands out because I think most people don't think that way. Most people use it for their own, like to get more attention. And I don't know. I feel like you're doing this for the right reasons.
Well, if we don't think that way, we're missing a lot. And as you talk, I'm reminded of the lyrics to one of my favorite hymns. It goes something like, "Because I have been given much, I too must give." And, the sooner we understand and grasp that orientation in life, the more joy we're going to find in life, I think. I can't think of anything that's more satisfying than serving other people and watching them grow and just standing back and watching. I look at my grandchildren and now my great-grandchildren, and I'm watching the great parenting that they're getting, and that's a legacy. And they're discovering things that are really important earlier in life than I did, and that's especially satisfying. Well, how does the secret society of success challenge the idea of success as an individual achievement? We talked about that some, but you write about it very articulately in your book. Tell us more about that. Challenging the idea of success as an individual achievement.
Yeah. There's this quote that I love from Albert Schweitzer. And he says, "I don't know what your destiny will be. Some of you will perhaps occupy remarkable positions. Perhaps some of you will become famous by your pens or as artists. But I know one thing. The only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve."
Wow.
And that to me is a very important thing in that I hope that all of us have the ability to influence a lot of people. But if we do it not from the posture of I want to be famous, but I want to help others, I want to serve others, I think that is the journey that I want to go on. I hope, for you, I want you to continue to elevate your own platform and your ability as a podcast host and as a writer. I hope your articles get so many more views than ever before, because I think that your ultimate heart posture is to serve others. And I think that's where it goes from kind of that individual achievement, wanting to be the one that everybody's talking about, to more maximizing the health of the whole. And I think that's where we're at our best. When we bring our skills, our talents, our abilities in the service of others, that to me is the shift.
So let's talk about early warning signs here.
Mm-hmm.
How can people recognize when they are chasing external validation rather than internal fulfillment? What are some of the whistles that ought to be going off if they choose to notice them?
Yeah, there's a lot of symptoms of the spotlight mindset, that those warning signs. Comparison is one that we've talked about. Fear of failure is actually another warning sign. Like, are you so afraid to move forward because you're so concerned about what might happen if, how others would think about me if? Another warning sign is relationally. Is this working for you and the people around you? So the relational dynamics are important. And, I was giving you that example of if I were trying to be a speaker 40 to 50 times a year, I can tell you this would not be working for my wife. And so you have to pay attention to those things. Is your pursuit of success or whatever you are aiming after, is it working for everybody? So those are a few. And I feel like the second that you start to find yourself wrestling with one of those things, it's a nice moment to just say, maybe we should look at some of this a little bit differently.
Yeah. So, Tim, how do you personally approach work-life integration versus balance? How do you manage all that? You have a lovely wife. You have 2 children. I think you said they're 8 and 5. They need you, and you're doing a lot of important work professionally. So how do you balance all that?
Yeah, it can be a challenge. I love the work that I do. It doesn't feel like work. It really feels like a calling.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's really hard. I don't really struggle with the when people say you got to shut it off and you can't take this home with you. It's like I hear that and I believe that. I want my kids to feel present. I don't want to be sitting over there on my computer while I'm trying to play with them.
Right.
And so, but yet I love talking about some of the projects that I'm working on with my kids. And so the way that I try to balance some of it is when I'm home, I really don't want my family to feel my work.
Yeah.
That might mean that when I put the kids down, at 8:30, I might have to work on some things, or maybe when they're doing rest time on the weekends, go get an hour to be able to work on something, or I wake up at 5:30 to get a couple hours in before people wake up. So one thing that I've noticed with working alongside David Novak and talking to a lot of the people that we do on our podcast is I feel like leaders have a lot of irons in the fire. I've just noticed that at the highest level, these people have a lot of irons in the fire. And the same is true for me. I feel like I have a lot of things moving. And so you just kind of find a way to make it work. I don't always get it right, but I really do try to not make my family feel that work. And my wife's really great. She's a truth teller. And so, she'll sometimes say, "What are you thinking about?" And I'm like, that's a good reminder. Oh, sorry.
Where's your head?
Where's
Tim?
your head? Exactly. And so I try to be fairly structured with kind of leaving at a certain time. Kind of that 5:30 to 8:30 is kind of that family time window. And even then, just helping around the house. My wife and I are partners in all of that, and so we're cleaning up the dishes, getting kids lunches made, and then if she goes to bed. Now, I maybe have a little bit more time to work on things if I need to, but also think it comes down to priorities. And, is that truly due tomorrow? Like, do you actually have to do it? And, so I think there's a lot there, but I try to balance it the best of my ability, but I love the work. It never really even feels like work.
So how do you view the intersection between personal growth and professional success? They're intertwined in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. I always feel like I am on this journey to the next thing. And next, not even in like transitioning, but more like leveling up. How am I learning and growing? And, I feel like I am one who is willing to take on the next, the bigger responsibility, the larger amount of work. I'm like, bring it on. I'll figure it out. I'll learn things that I need to learn. I'll collaborate with others that I need to collaborate to be able to, take that on successfully. So for me, I just have found that over time, I say yes to a lot of things because I've just believed that in time, it's the long game. I will be able to find, more success in the future if I'm willing to, learn, take on more responsibility. I look at it kind of that leveling up, that stair step. And so I'm just trying to head in that path as often as I can.
What you just said reminded me of one of the things my friend Stephen Covey used to teach. He said, it's easier to say no to some things in life if you have a larger yes inside of you. So you've been talking about the big yeses. You want to be a successful husband, a successful father. You want those relationships to be very strong and timeless. You don't want your professional endeavors to get in the way of that. Your professional endeavors can reinforce that if you structure it right, and that's kind of what you've been talking about. Well, in your book, you write about rest as a key to success. Why is it so difficult for some people to embrace the idea of getting some rest?
I know I can feel it in my body. When you and I are talking right now after just coming off of a Thanksgiving break, and I knew I just needed to take a little bit of time to disconnect from some of it. And there might be some Saturdays where I'm like, I know I have a podcast that I could be doing some research for this next week, but I kind of just need to take the day and not. I need to go hit some golf balls. I need to, whatever it is. Sure. I feel it. And so I'm very self-aware on those things and give myself the rest when I need to, give myself the permission to turn it off. There's nobody that's driving me more than me. And
Sure.
I think that's probably true for a lot of leaders. So I've started to play a lot of sim golf. So just in a simulator, I can go play 18 holes in about 45 minutes. And I've really enjoyed trying to do that a couple times a week. And that's been a really good way for me to rest. And
Sure.
I'm more creative than perhaps I would like to admit, but that ability to kind of disconnect or go read the thing or, I'm like, hey, I want to have enough flexibility in my schedule to where I don't want to grind through these things right now. I really need to do something else where I follow that energy and that creativity, and I'll get back to it. So I think there's a constant shuffling and a freedom to maybe take the meeting that on paper it looks like you don't have any time to take that coffee, but I leave the coffee so energized from the conversation. So that is a form of rest. So I'm paying attention. I'm willing to get it wrong sometimes, but it's a work in progress.
Indeed. Well, Tim Schurrer, thank you so much for joining us on Leadership. As Tim reminds us, true success isn't about standing in the spotlight, it's about shining it on others. The most impactful leaders aren't those who chase applause, but those who create environments where people thrive. In a world that equates visibility with value, Tim's message is a radical invitation to measure success not by recognition, but by contribution. As you reflect on this conversation, ask yourself, where in your life are you chasing the spotlight, and where could you instead choose to serve? That shift may be the most transformative decision you ever make. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with your team, your network, or anyone else who's ready to sharpen their focus on things that bring out the best in themselves and in others. And be sure to leave a review. Even a single sentence fuels the algorithms that promote the great content that the Leadership podcast offers. And for free resources to help you in your leadership journey, go to leadership.net. That's leadership.net. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.